talk more about these movements now with Martin Smith from eNCA Capital. Martin, as always, thank you for your time on this chilly Friday. Let's start with the general markets. Not a lot of movement on the JSE today compared to yesterday, where we saw a lot of profit taking. Today there were marginal movements that ended off the day on the JSE. Talk us through some of those catalysts, both locally and offshore.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, lackluster is probably the best way to describe the market today. We started off a little strongly, but then I think the market got a little bit nervous about those US non-farm payroll numbers that were coming out later in the afternoon. And when those numbers came out, it was actually quite interesting. They were a little weaker than people expected. So we saw the US market pick its head up a little bit, because I think it's the classic thing of bad news is good news, because it looks like the economy there isn't recovering as quickly as people think it is, which means that stimulus is going to continue for longer. And I think there was a little bit of nervousness in the market, specifically last night's session in the US, where people thought that stimulus might kind of dry up a little quicker than initially thought. So again, bad news is good news, and the US is ticking up higher. And I think that's going to be the big theme going forward now is stimulus in the US, as well as US inflationary numbers. I think those are the big kind of drivers of the market globally, and kind of in emerging markets like South Africa in the next sort of 6 to 12 to 18 months. Obviously, with more kind of positivity around stimulus continuing for longer, we saw that kind of creep into a weaker dollar, which obviously, as you know, has affected the rand. I mean, the rand was 13 cents today. It's now at about 13.50 at the time of talking. So it's been an incredible move for the rand over the last few weeks.
And that's what I wanted to ask you about. Is it simply a dollar weakness that is driving the rand strength that we've seen over the last week? Actually, it's continued to strengthen.
So it's a couple of things. So you're absolutely correct in saying that a weak US dollar is a massive part of that. But also, if you look at what commodity stocks are doing, commodity prices are doing, it's also feeding into a stronger rand, as well as kind of issues that we've seen out of Turkey this week. I've also seen a little bit of switching from emerging market currencies. So from the Turkish lira into the South African rand, and there's just a lot of momentum. I mean, our fair value at Anchor is about 14.50, but market doesn't really care what your spreadsheet says. There's a lot of positive momentum, and I think it might get a bit stronger from here, actually.
Very interesting indeed. And let's get on to some company news, Martin. MTN vying for a operating license in Ethiopia after losing the first time round. Your thoughts on these efforts and really the kind of market opportunity that presents itself in Ethiopia for MTN?
Yeah, so MTN had a capital markets day, and there was nothing in there that was massively surprising. I mean, a lot of these things have been spoken of before. The Ethiopian license has been spoken about before, the separation of the fiber business and the fintech businesses. So MTN is a story that I've liked for a long time. And I think we spoke on the show when it was about 70. And I said, don't be surprised if this is a kind of 100 rand story in a couple of months. And thankfully, it's ended up that way for my clients. But I think, I think they're looking for opportunities. They're looking to sell on assets of about 50 billion rand. They're looking to separate certain businesses, list other ones. So I think MTN is a classic help story. And I think it's all very, very positive. I just hope that there isn't anything that comes out of the woodwork like we've seen in Nigeria with the SIM cards linked to ID numbers and. But I think overall positive and a lot of runway for MTN to continue.
Right. What about Multichoice? They seem to have benefited quite a bit from people turning into couch potatoes during COVID-19, showing some strong revenue growth in this particular trading update.
No, you're absolutely not wrong there. I mean, I think people have been enjoying their Showmax and their DSTV, and as live sport is starting to come back into the fray, I think that's also been quite beneficial for them. But the big thing with Multichoice has always been that rest of Africa story, because that has always been loss-making. And a big part of why the numbers were a little bit ahead of consensus in terms of profits was because the rest of Africa division had reduced the amount of loss that had accrued. So I think that story kind of unfolding, because the market's always ascribed a zero value to that portion of the business. And as that part becomes profitable over time, which I think the runway is about 2 years for that to happen, then we should see some value start to come through on the share. So it's one that we hold, it's one that we like. I'd say this trading update was relatively mixed, but I think on valuations, I think it still looks like a promising story.
And then finally, Martin, what about Adapt IT? What's the latest on the offer of that acquisition?
So it's been a little bit of a soap opera there. I don't know if anyone's been watching, but basically you had like Huge Group on this side offering shares for shares in Huge Group for Adapt IT shares around R9.09 is what they're valued at. That's you exchanging your Adapt IT shares for Huge Group shares. And on the other side, you've got Volaris, which is a Canadian IT company who are offering cash. So they've offered R6.50 initially, all cash offer. They've now topped it up to R7 after Huge Group up their offer last week Friday. So it's a little bit of back and forth. People are going to have to make a vote at the end of this month. So very interesting. But I think ultimately, people are going to choose the cash offer in Volaris is my best guess.
And we'll wait and see how that soap opera plays out. Martin, as always, thank you for your time this evening. That's Martin Smith
Thank you so much.
from eNCA Capital, giving us the latest in your market update. In the